February 1942, the Caucasus Front. Orders for the 46th Army secure the passes before the spring thaw. A rifle platoon under Lieutenant Sergei Antonov is assigned to patrol the desolate Mamison sector. The men march in formation, boots sinking into snow, their Mosin-Nagant rifles a cold heavyweight. Training echoes in their movements. Every step is measured, every glance fixed upon their commander. Their discipline is sharp, forged over hard months of endless drills across the vast frozen steppes. Each soldier knows the code by heart: no noise, no delay, no weakness shown in this hostile terrain. Antonov, once a history teacher, now studies his maps with the cold precision of a skilled tactician. He reminds the men of their sole objective: hold the pass at all costs, deny any enemy infiltration. The platoon carries PPSH-41s in a DP-27 machine gun, its ammunition belts heavy with deadly purpose. Their supply sleds creak under the strain, pulled by exhausted horses, their final line of logistics. Around the campfire, Private Mikhail speaks softly, telling old folk stories to break the heavy silence. Laughter spreads briefly through the biting air, a fragile warmth in a deeply hostile and unforgiving winter. Nurse Elena tends to the men's frostbite, her hands red from icy water, her gaze calm, but so very weary. They share hard bread and tins of stewed meat, each portion rationed with practice, stark discipline. Every face shows deep fatigue, but also the unspoken, unbreakable bond of men who rely on survival. They write quick, hurried letters home to their loved ones, knowing that delivery is tragically uncertain. A sergeant methodically sharpens his bayonet, the polished steel glinting coldly in the faint lantern light. Others quietly polish their rifles, muttering dark jokes amongst themselves to hide their growing unease. The platoon is small, just 35 men, but each soldier is expertly trained to fight as one unit. Silence falls over the camp, once more broken only by the sharp rhythmic crackle of the firewood. The Caucasus Mountains tower above them, ancient ridges carved by century snow falling in silence. Locals watch from the edge of a village, their expressions wary, but respectful of the military uniform. One elder offers the soldiers bread and salt, a gesture of hospitality that is mixed with a silent warning. Antonov records the coordinates in his field notebook, the dark ink beginning to freeze inside his pen. Orders from Division Command crackle through the radio: maintain constant patrols, no retreat without signal. The men review signals on the RBM-1 field radio, the incessant static hissing in the background noise. Duty logs are written with painstaking care, weather coordinates and dwindling ammunition counts noted. Routine is the very backbone of their survival here. Without it, chaos would quickly take a deadly hold. Yet the fatigue lingers. Every single climb up another icy, treacherous slope drains their remaining strength. Fingers are stiff, rifles feel heavy as lead, but the column somehow pushes forward through the snow. At dusk, the platoon finally halts near a ruined watchtower, a structure long abandoned to the elements. Antonov delivers a quiet final briefing: we secure this ridge and we hold it until we are relieved. The men simply nod in the fading light. Discipline always comes first. Their personal doubts must come second. As night settles, they arrange the watch rotations, 2 cold, lonely hours for each of the waiting men. Beneath the dark mountain sky, 35 soldiers prepare for war, unaware of what waits beyond routine. February 12th, the official duty log notes an abnormal disturbance reported near the camp's desolate and windswept northern slope. A young private reports finding strange footprints in the snow, impressions far larger than any standard-issue military boot he has ever seen. Measurements show impressions nearly 40 centimeters long, with a stride that is both deep and unsettlingly uneven in the fresh powder. The lieutenant files a cautious report on the findings, but command dismisses it as simple optical distortion caused by drifting snow. That night, the platoon's horses snort nervously in the dark, pulling hard against their frozen tethers as if sensing an unseen predator. A single lantern swings wildly in the biting wind, casting strange, jagged shadows that dance menacingly across the cold rock face. A lone sentry hears the distinct, sharp clatter of stones tumbling from the ridge, high above, though no visible figure can be spotted. The wind carries a low, guttural moan. At first mistaken for the storm, it seems far too rhythmic and far too deliberately paced. Leaning in close, Mikhail whispers to a comrade: "The old stories from my village speak of ancient watchers living in these very mountains." The comrade scoffs audibly at the words, yet his whitened knuckles betray him as he grips his rifle just a little bit tighter. Morning inspection reveals a shocking sight. Several heavy supply crates have been violently overturned, their thick wooden planks shattered. Rations are scattered everywhere, yet untouched by teeth marks, as if the heavy crates were simply lifted high up and then dropped. The RBM-1 field radio crackles with loud bursts of static. The vital signal from command is interrupted for long minutes at a time. A small patrol sets out their boots crunching in the tense silence, their wary eyes constantly scanning the ominous, dark tree line. They discover deep claw-like gouges scored along a wooden post of the crumbling, ruined watchtower, splintering the old timber. A sergeant carefully sketches the bizarre marks in his logbook, noting their irregular size depth and the sheer force they imply. The men exchange tense, uneasy glances amongst themselves. Their iron discipline, forged in battle, is now beginning to fray at the edges. At morning roll call, a heavy silence falls over the men as one sentry from the night watch fails to respond when his name is called out. His Mosin Nagant rifle is found later half buried deep in the snow, its thick leather strap looking as if it was violently torn in two. Search parties meticulously comb the entire ridge, but find no tracks of any kind leading away from the sentry's last known position. Command's order crackles back over the radio, brutally simple. You are to maintain your position. Continue all scheduled patrols. Antonov repeats the chilling directive to his men, his voice attempting to sound steady, but strained by the effort to hide his own fear. That evening, the frightened soldiers huddle much closer to the fire, their loaded PPSH-41 submachine guns held tightly in their laps. Mikhail tells of the Almas hairy mountain men, who the old legends say can move without sound and steal villagers from their homes. Some of the men let out nervous laughter, others just stare intently out into the suffocating darkness that presses in beyond the flames. Nurse Elena listens to the terrifying story in complete silence, her weary face looking ghostly pale in the lantern's flickering glow. A sudden, powerful gust of wind extinguishes the roaring campfire, instantly plunging the entire camp into absolute terrifying blackness. In the total darkness, boots shuffle on frozen ground, followed by the sharp metallic clicks of dozens of rifle safeties being switched off. The fire is eventually relit with trembling hands, but a deep unease lingers in the air, like a killing frost settling in the lungs. A new log entry reads, "Morale unstable. Men are dangerously tense," requesting immediate armed reinforcement to this position. Over the next few days, the patrols continue as ordered, but all voices have now been lowered to hushed, frightened whispers. Soldiers begin to glance over their shoulders, constantly twitching at every phantom echo the unforgiving wind carries down the mountain. The radio officer reports hearing faint signals, not in any known code, followed by what sounded disturbingly like a low, guttural chant. On the ridge, a soldier's binoculars catch a large silhouette moving against the skyline, and then in the blink of an eye, it is gone. By the night's end, the surviving men realize a chilling truth. The distant German front is no longer their only or their deadliest enemy. Third night on patrol, the oppressive silence of the mountains grows unnaturally heavy, pressing down on the men like a physical weight. Thick snow falls without a sound, a white curtain that muffles every crunching step, every whispered word isolating them completely. A soldier freezes mid-step, swearing he can hear the soft rhythmic sound of breathing just beyond the rocky ridge, impossibly close. They cautiously search the entire slope, rifles raised and ready, but find only the endless, silent drifting of newly fallen snow. Later, as they march, faint footsteps seem to echo parallel to their own path, hidden somewhere deep within the dense, dark woods. The disturbing pattern repeats. One heavy step follows theirs, always arriving just half a beat behind them, a perfect mocking mimicry. The sergeant, his nerves frayed, fires a single warning shot. The mountains throw back a sharp, mocking echo that quickly fades away. There is no reply to the gunshot, only a deep, ringing silence that feels more menacing than any return fire would have been. In the grim morning light, they discover a mule carcass from their supply train, its body horribly torn open and left in the snow. The wounds are ragged and deep, far worse than anything a bayonet or a shell fragment could possibly inflict upon the poor animal. Looking at the carnage, Mikhail mutters to himself, "This is not the work of any German soldier. This is something else entirely." Antonov quickly silences him with his sharp glare. Their discipline, their very last line of defense against chaos, absolutely must hold. Yet a cold, creeping unease spreads through the ranks like a contagion, a sickness of the mind that no discipline can fully cure. At night, sentries report the sound of large stones being hurled into the camp, thrown with incredible force from unseen hands. The men scramble to take cover behind rocks and sleds, aiming into the darkness. But no visible enemy ever approaches the firelight. New tracks now circle the camp, large, erratic prints that vanish abruptly into solid rock faces, leaving no trace of their passage. Antonov orders his sergeant to make detailed sketches of the prints, intending to send them with the platoon's next official report. A young private finally collapses from sheer exhaustion, sobbing and refusing to take another terrifying 2-hour shift on a night watch. His comrades must drag him back into line, their own voices, a frantic mix of shouting, whispering, and arguing in the tense darkness. The invisible thread of military order that holds them all together is thinning, threatening to snap at any given moment. The RBM-1 radio crackles to life again, spitting out faint garbled signals that pierce through the heavy wall of unending static. The radio operator swears he hears a low voice speaking in broken fragments, a strange tongue he cannot identify, then only static. Division command, when reached, flatly denies transmitting any signals or messages to their position on the designated frequency. The precious fuel for their main lantern runs dangerously low. The nights in the high mountains grow darker and feel so much longer. In the rapidly dimming light, several soldiers glimpse a sudden movement right at the edge of the camp's defensive perimeter. It's a tall, dark silhouette significantly broader than a man, and it vanishes into the trees before anyone can properly aim. Raw fear spreads through the camp. They immediately double the guard, knowing it will only exhaust them faster, but they have no choice. Rifles are now kept constantly loaded at all times, with nervous, restless fingers resting dangerously close on their cold triggers. Their meager rations continue to dwindle. The last of the hard bread is shared between the men in a grim, resigned silence. The small, precious packets of letters for home remain unwritten. No one has the heart or the hope left to compose final words. On patrol, the men find enormous, deep claw marks carved into the frozen bark of the ancient pine trees that surround the pass. The fresh splinters of the wood show a recent tearing, as if the marks were gouged into the tree in a fit of pure animalistic anger. A frozen stream nearby bears heavy prints, crossing it pressed too deep into the ice to belong to a deer or any other local fauna. Mikhail insists the Almas is stalking them for a final kill. The other soldiers harshly tell him to be silent, to not speak its name. The nervous jokes and laughter from weeks before are now entirely gone. Still in the suffocating quiet, no one laughs anymore. One night, in a moment of shared panic, a single emergency flare is fired, bathing the snowy landscape in ghostly white light. For a single terrifying heartbeat, the flare's white light exposes massive hairy shoulders retreating swiftly up the dark ridge. The soldiers now screaming fire wildly into the dark, their bullets erupting in the snow, far behind the rapidly fleeing shape. When the brilliant light of the flare finally fades away into blackness, nothing remains on the slope but a profound, deep silence. Casualty report, Morning Edition: one soldier is lightly wounded in the leg, not by the creature, but by panicked, friendly fire. The men now whisper constantly in the dark, their hushed voices speaking of the ultimate taboo for a soldier desertion from their post. Antonov overhears them and insists through clenched teeth, "We hold the ridge until we are relieved. That is the final order." His voice, once a source of strength for the men, now visibly trembles with fear as he closes the worn leather of the logbook. The platoon now moves in near total silence, as if the very act of speaking words themselves might summon their unseen stalker. And always from the jagged black ridges that loom above them like tombstones, a pair of unseen, intelligent eyes continue to follow. February 14th, a furious, blinding blizzard sweeps across the Mamison sector without any prior warning, engulfing the entire platoon. Visibility drops to mere meters in an instant. The heavy, wet snow lashes at exposed skin with the stinging intensity of shrapnel. The platoon huddles for cover in shallow trenches, dug into the hard ice, their thin greatcoats offering little comfort from the storm. Their RBM-1 radio sputters with a final burst of desperate static, then dies, completely cutting them off from the rest of the world. The terrified horses scream in pure panic, pulling and straining against their frozen ropes as an unseen terror descends upon the camp. Suddenly, sentries shout in alarm. They've spotted movement on the ridge, a dark shape moving unnaturally fast through the whiteout. A single emergency flare is fired, casting their desolate world in a harsh, unforgiving white light that illuminates the swirling snow. For a few heartbeats, a colossal figure looms against the snow-swept ridge, its form impossibly large, its posture utterly inhuman. Its shoulders are broad as a boulder, its entire body is covered in thick, matted hair, a creature born of nightmare and freezing cold. Then the oppressive, absolute darkness swallows the monstrous figure, leaving only the terrifying after-image in the men's minds. A palpable wave of panic ripples through the trench. Antonov screams for fire discipline, his voice nearly lost in the howling wind. Volleys of PPSH submachine guns erupt in a deafening roar, their bright red tracers cutting brilliant fleeting lines in the storm. The platoon's DP-27 light machine gun chatters relentlessly, its barrel glowing a dull red against the pure white of the driving snow. Yet no return fire ever comes from the ridge. There is no muzzle flash, no sound of enemy rifles answering their desperate barrage. The only reply is the heavy, sickening thud of massive rocks being hurled down into the camp from the darkness with deadly accuracy. A soldier suddenly collapses with a choked cry. His chest is crushed inwards, his ribs splintered by the impact of a hurled boulder. His terrified comrades drag him back into the trench, their faces ghostly pale with abject terror in the flickering, inconsistent light. Another flare arcs high into the sky, its magnesium glare fighting a losing battle against the overwhelming power of the blizzard. In the flash, eyes catch a horrifying reflection from high above, two red, unblinking orbs staring down at them without emotion. A renewed, frantic wave of gunfire follows this sighting, the bullets tearing uselessly into the shadows and the swirling white chaos. Stones and heavy tree branches rain down upon their position, flung with an impossible force that no man could ever hope to possess. A canvas tent collapses under the brutal assault, the men inside scrambling out with their rifles raised, eyes wide with raw panic. One young private is seized from the edge of the trench, dragged screaming into the whiteout by a massive hairy arm. His desperate cries for help grow fainter and fainter, then are finally swallowed completely by the roar of the raging storm. The remaining men fire blindly into the blizzard, their bullets causing small, pointless explosions in the snow all around them. With bayonets now fixed to their rifles, they brace themselves in the trench, preparing for a brutal and intimate close-quarters assault. A massive dark silhouette charges directly through the thick gunpowder smoke, moving with a terrifying and unnatural speed. Bayonets strike its form with dull thuds, but the colossal figure simply barrels through them, knocking men aside like dolls. Fresh, bright red blood stains the pristine snow, hot steam rising from the wounds in the freezing air of the violent blizzard. The sergeant, seeing the line break, screams an order for a full retreat back to the relative safety of the old watchtower ruins. The surviving men stumble through the deep snow, slipping on ice, clutching their heavy weapons tightly as they flee for their lives. Behind them, a series of deep, guttural roars rolls down the ridge, a sound of pure triumph and unrestrained primal rage. The DP-27 light machine gun finally jams its complex mechanism, freezing solid in the extreme debilitating cold of the storm. Antonov screams for his men to cover the withdrawal, firing his own service pistol uselessly into the all-encompassing darkness. Another soldier simply vanishes from the retreating line. A massive hand reaches out from the whiteout, and then he is just gone. The platoon's morale completely shatters. The remaining men scatter in total confusion, each soldier now fighting only for himself. The blizzard howls on a neutral, chaotic force that masks the movements of both the terrifying enemy and any possible route of escape. Sporadic flashes of desperate gunfire flicker across the slope for another hour. Then there is only a profound and final silence. When the gray cold dawn finally approaches, only half of the platoon remains huddled together in the ruins of the watchtower. Their former trench is horrifyingly empty, but for the dark stains of blood, torn packs, spent shell casings, and the silent dead. Dawn finally breaks over the silent ridge, a pale, watery light filtering through the ragged, torn edges of the departing storm clouds. The blizzard has passed, leaving behind a profound silence that feels somehow heavier and more oppressive than the sound of shellfire. Vast snowdrifts across the battlefield are stained a dark, ugly crimson with the frozen blood of both the dead and the wounded. Most Nagant rifles, the tools of their trade, lie abandoned where they fell, their wooden stocks half buried in the unforgiving ice. Lieutenant Antonov limps among the day's survivors, his greatcoat torn to shreds, his face a pale, emotionless mask of pure exhaustion. He calls the roll. Only 15 men answer. Less than half of the platoon that marched into this pass remains alive or accounted for. The names of the 20 missing men are called out one by one, their syllables echoing briefly before being swallowed by the silence. A thick layer of frost has stiffened their uniforms into icy shells. Their faces are gaunt and hollowed out from profound shock. The DP-27 machine gun is retrieved from the snow, its heavy barrel bent into a useless curve, the weapon now completely silent. A medic quietly notes that the wounds on the dead, crushing injuries deep tier do not match any known German weapon in service. The few remaining rations are counted and then divided amongst the survivors. Their supplies are now almost completely gone. A single letter, half written and stained with water, flutters in the wind, a final message that will now never be sent home. Private Mikhail, the storyteller, now refuses to speak a single word. His haunted eyes are locked on the distant silent tree line. Their exhausted horses are all either dead or have vanished into the storm. The vital supply sleds are overturned and shattered. One survivor whispers to another that he saw its hands clearly in the flare light. They were massive human-like hands, not claws. Another man, shivering, insists it was far taller than any man could possibly be, a giant that moved like a shadow through the snow. Antonov orders them to be silent. Their official after-action reports must remain disciplined, factual, and free of such talk. Still, the attempt at discipline is a thin veneer. A raw animal fear flickers in every furtive glance the men exchange. The shattered remains of the platoon withdraw toward the small village, moving in a broken, limping formation, no longer a unit. The immediate threat is gone, but the feeling of being hunted has not left them. Every single step down the slope feels watched. The villagers meet them at the edge of town with solemn, knowing eyes, offering them bread, but asking absolutely no questions. An old elder, seeing their state, mutters a quick prayer in the old tongue for protection, then silently turns his back and walks away. The soldiers do not meet their gazes. A deep, profound sense of shame for having survived now mingles with their lingering fear. Back at a rear headquarters, Antonov drafts his official report. Platoon casualties sustained 46%. Direct cause currently unknown. He pauses for a long moment, his pen shaking visibly in his hand, then continues his report with a cold mechanical formality. Separate medical logs describe the nature of the dead's injuries as massive blunt force trauma, cause officially unverified. High Command issues no official reply to his report, only new simple orders for the survivors to be redeployed to another sector. The men sit on wooden benches in complete silence, their helmets resting at their feet, quietly waiting for their transport to arrive. No one speaks of the battle of the creature or of the missing a shared trauma, and a soldier's discipline seals their mouths shut. Yet in their shared heavy silence lies the undeniable weight of a terrifying memory that they will carry with them forever. Weeks later, the entire Mamison Patrol is officially struck. From all Red Army operational logs, its history effectively erased. Official records are amended to list the bloody engagement as minor enemy harassment, enemy presence unconfirmed. The casualty lists are quietly filed without any detail. Only the names, ranks, and serial numbers of the 20 fallen soldiers. Lieutenant Antonov is reassigned to a different front, his significant wounds officially noted in his file as simply combat-related. The 15 survivors are dispersed into other units across the Caucasus, strictly forbidden to ever discuss the harrowing incident. Yet whispers of the battle persist in the barracks late at night, carried in hushed, frightened tones from one soldier to another. NKVD interrogation files report contradictory and hysterical accounts of what appear to be non-human assailants. Most of the official transcripts of these interviews are heavily redacted, with entire pages blacked out by the state censors. A single rough sketch somehow survives in a forgotten file, a towering figure, shoulders broad, its entire body covered in hair. Beneath this haunting drawing, the single word Almas is found scrawled in faint pencil, a question left unanswered forever. One curious medical officer notes fractures on the dead, consistent with an impact from an object of both immense force and mass. Another doctor later annotates that same report with a chilling addendum: no known conventional or experimental weapon matches. Orders from Moscow classify all physical evidence, photos, and testimonies relating to the incident under the designation File 17 Black. The local villagers, their faces set like stone, refuse to guide any military patrols into the upper ridges of the pass thereafter. Ancient regional folklore resurfaces among the local people, old tales of silent, hairy watchers that live forever in the deep snow. A check of the regional archives reveals a long, unsettling history of unexplained disappearances stretching back for many generations. The ruined watchtower where the platoon made its final desperate stand is declared off-limits and permanently abandoned by the Army. Later military reports and maps refer to the entire area with a new ominous designation, Zone Silent, a place to be avoided. Aerial reconnaissance shows no discernible enemy presence, yet the ridge remains a place that all subsequent patrols are ordered to avoid. The soldiers who survived the brutal ordeal are known to suffer from recurring vivid nightmares for the rest of their short lives. Mikhail, the storyteller, is transferred south, but deserts weeks later. His ultimate fate, like that of his stories, is never found. Antonov files one last personal, unofficial note in his journal: we were not the only ones fighting for our lives in those mountains. This final handwritten note, is discovered after his death in fort and has never entered into any kind of official military record. In the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, fragments of the long-sealed file on the incident are quietly declassified. Among them are grainy, amateurish sketches of the creature and several unsigned contradictory testimonies from the terrified survivors. One small report states the subject was observed to move upright. Its total mass was estimated to be at least 200 kilograms. Another brief entry from a different soldier notes, its eyes reflected a deep red in the flare light. Visual duration 3 seconds. The few available documents in the file and abruptly stamped with the final dismissive and bureaucratic word, closed. Today, only a persistent rumor survives the long decades that in the Caucasus, men once faced something much older than war itself. And in the frozen, silent ridges of the high mountain passes, the profound silence still listens, and it still remembers. February 1942, the Caucasus Front, a full Soviet rifle platoon marched into the Mamasin sector on patrol. Fewer than half ever returned. The official after-action report listed the platoon's significant losses in stark detail, but deliberately omitted any mention of the cause. The unit's final duty log entry on the matter was disturbingly brief, containing only 3 chilling words, cause unknown, unresolved. Their field radio simply fell silent on the second night. No enemy gunfire or artillery was ever reported by any other unit in the sector. Yet the deep snows bore strange prints unlike any man's boot. Massive impressions, far too large, that vanished into the solid rock of the ridge. Fragmentary witness accounts from the survivors spoke of dark shadows glimpsed in the flare light, shapes broader than any soldier moving with impossible speed. For hours, machine gun fire echoed through the raging blizzard, and then an abrupt and total silence fell over the entire mountainside. The true account of what followed was systematically erased from the official records, its file classified and buried for nearly 5 decades. The official reports are silent, the files are sealed, and the men are gone now. But the hushed whispers of what happened still remain. This is the story of the Caucasus Stalker, the night Soviet mountain troops came face to face with what they believed to be the savage Almas.